Welcome back to the channel guys, and welcome back to Koenigsegg'S Dagbok, and welcome to episode 11 where we'll be talking about the world's fastest production car, i.e. the RS is here right before you. And yes guys, this is in fact the world's fastest production car. It isn't the Bugatti Chiron Supersport 300 Plus, and that is in fact the world's fastest car because that is in fact not the same production car that made it to the production line. The production car, i.e. the Chiron Supersport, is based on the Supersport 300 Plus because it literally can't even hit the 300 mile/hour barrier, and that makes this the world's fastest production car, i.e. the RS. And of course, this thing set the record all the way back on the 4th of November in 2017, and it is still undefeated to this day. And it set the record at a speed of 277.87 miles an hour or 446.97 kilometers an hour. Wow, this just shows what Koenigsegg could do all the way back then. And this had a production run from 2015 to 2018. And this is in fact believed that only 25 Agera RSs were made, and that is in fact not true because 27 Agera RSs were in fact actually made. I'll explain. Because obviously 25 customer cars, the 26th one being the factory development car, and the 27th one was in fact a replacement car for one of the 25 customer cars, i.e. Agera RS Gryphon, which actually crashed during its shakedown testing, and the replacement car for that was none other than the Agera RS Phoenix, i.e. making it the 27th car. And later on, Gryphon in its own was completely rebuilt, hence making the total production output of the Agera RS 27 units, hence proved. And of course, this took a lot of things from the Agera S and the Agera R, such as a usable luggage compartment, the fact that you could remove the hardtop and store it in the front, and also a couple of bits and bobs from the 1-to-1 program. And it also came with a couple of enhancements, such as a brand new front splitter with that vertical center strake that is literally taken from the 1-to-1. Canards, of course, the side skirts, a brand new dynamic active aero rear wing, which could make the Agera RS generate 450 kilograms of downforce at the speed of 250 kilometers an hour. And it also came with an advanced dynamic underbody flap system as well as advanced lightweight sound insulation. And of course, with all these new added functionalities and all the new equipment, this thing still weighed in at less than the Agera S and the Agera R because this thing only weighed in at 1395 kilograms. It had the same 5-liter twin-turbocharged V8 which weighed in at 189 kilograms, and it made 1160 horsepower, and it could generate 1280 newton-meters of torque. And the engine redlined at 8250 RPMs, and the Agera RS also came with the 1 megawatt upgrade or the 1 megawatt option, which only 3 Agera RSs were ever opted with, and we'll in fact be taking a look at every single Agera RS ever made, so stay tuned in a bit. And of course, the 1 megawatt upgrade upped the power output from 1160 to 1360 horsepower, literally the same as the 1-to-1. And of course, as I said, only 3 Agera RSs were ever opted with the 1 megawatt upgrade, and the Agera RS could go from 0 to 62 miles an hour or 100 kilometers an hour in 3 seconds, and could go from 0 to 200 kilometers an hour in 8 seconds, and it could go from 0 to 200 kilometers an hour and back to 0 in 13.5 seconds. Some very impressive numbers right there. And of course, a complete Kevlar reinforced carbon fiber body, and of course the hollow air core carbon fiber wheels, obviously carbon ceramics, and it obviously also came with the double wishbone suspension in the front and the back, with the BPS gas hydraulic shock absorbers in the front and the back, also with the Koenigsegg triplex damper in the rear, and also the Koenigsegg Z-style progressive and lightweight anti-roll bars in the front and the back, thereby making this a proper handling monster, which is literally every Koenigsegg until right now. And of course, the suspension also comes handy with the Koenigsegg electronic stability control system with 3 modes, i.e. normal, wet and track. And of course, the engine is paired to a 7-speed automatic gearbox with an auto shift mode in fact, and of course the Koenigsegg electronic differential. As I said, 27 made, a complete Kevlar reinforced carbon fiber body. Wow, this thing is a proper beast in its own, and it also came with the side air outlets right behind the front wheels to of course dispose of the hot air, similar to the 992 GT3 RS. And this is also the car that set the top speed world record of the world's fastest production car all the way back in 2017, nicknamed the Agera RS Ruthie, making this one of the most iconic Agera RSs out there. And of course, a beautiful shade of red with carbon fiber all over with silver accents, a beautiful spec in its own. Well guys, that ends it for the Agera RS, and that means it's time to take a look at every single RS ever made, starting with this. This is the Agera RS HM, and this is in fact one of the 3 Agera RSs with the 1 megawatt upgrade, meaning this thing puts out 1360 horsepower. Wow, as I said, only 3 Agera RSs came with the 1 megawatt upgrade, and this being one of them in probably one of the best specs. I mean, exposed carbon fiber with orange accents, a proper out there spec, a proper carbon fiber splitter, of course, canard side skirts, that basic dynamic rear wing. And moving on to chassis number 7116, this is quite a base spec. I mean, just white with carbon fiber bits here and there with the splitter, the canards, the side skirts, the rear wing, and of course that center stripe. Other than that, it is still a base spec, but it is an Agera RS, so it is still a proper top step holder. And moving on to chassis number 7118, and being one of the best spec Agera RSs out there, named the Agera RS ML, which are the initials of the owner. And this thing is a beautiful spec and it's one very bold. I mean, finished in a shade called Low Yellow with red accents all over. And this thing has a different body kit, which this thing is in fact got two canards, as you guys can see. A proper little bit more longer, I think, front splitter, side skirts, of course, that rear wing with ML badging, of course, right there in the back. And of course, this thing also in fact came out with the hollow air core carbon fiber wheels when it came out of the factory, but the owner swapped them for the VGRs or the vortex generating rims, which were introduced on the Agera. But nevertheless, this thing is probably one of the best spec'd Ageras, or one of the best spec'd Koenigseggs in existence. And moving on to chassis number 7119, finished in chili red with that carbon fiber stripe down the middle, a carbon fiber splitter, canard, side skirts, and that rear wing, and as well as the wing mirrors, of course. Quite a basic spec, but nevertheless, any color is better than white if you ask me. And moving on to chassis number 7120, this thing is a beautiful spec. I mean, exposed blue carbon with orange accents, a beauty in its own. Obviously, even in fact, the front splitter is also finished in exposed blue carbon with the orange accents, as well as the rear wing and the side skirt. This thing is a beautiful spec, complete blue carbon all over with the hollow air core carbon fiber wheels. I mean, imagine if even the wheels were also in blue carbon. Wow, that thing would have been quite an expensive option if the owner did go for it. And this in fact is my favorite Agera RS of all time, solely because of this spec, because this thing is a beauty to look at. I mean, just look at that turquoise matched up with the gold accents. It shouldn't go together in common or in general, but on the likes of an Agera RS, it goes together way more better than it should. And to be honest, this is exactly why I love this spec, and this is exactly why this has the #1 spot in my Agera RS spec list. And this thing is a beauty. I mean, carbon fiber all over, of course, that center stripe with the gold stripes accenting it around the edges, the front splitter, of course, the canards, the side skirts, the rear wing, and of course, what looks like to be a gold leather interior. Wow, I mean, whoa. Wow, take my money. And of course, moving on to chassis number 7123, and in fact 3 Agera RSRs were made, this one being the first one, i.e. chassis number 7122. This is chassis number 7123, making it the second RSR with just metallic black with dark red or maroonish accents. Of course, the carbon fiber splitter, the canards, the side skirts, the wing mirrors, and of course the wing. Other than that, it's just a black with a carbon fiber. If you ask me, it should have a light color such that the carbon fiber is actually visible, but nevertheless, to each their own. And next on we go to chassis number 7124, making this the third or 3 of 3 RSR, and this is also quite a good spec in its own. This thing has got a complete white paint job with the red accents, with of course that carbon fiber stripe going down the center. Of course, a beautiful spec in its own, carbon fiber splitter, carbon fiber canards, the side skirts, a complete carbon fiber rear wing, of course. And moving on to chassis number 7125, this thing is also a very beautiful spec in its own, exposed carbon fiber with light red accents, nicknamed the Genesis. As you guys can see, it is literally written right here where the Agera RS badge is, and this thing is a beautiful spec in its own. In fact, there is another one which literally has a similar spec, but that has single canards, whereas this has double canards. Wow, this thing is beautiful in its own, with even the RS badging in the red. Wow, I mean, even the calipers, this part right here, the side stripe, and of course the side skirts as well, even the edges painted in red, a beautiful spec in its own. Exposed carbon fiber with red, you can never go wrong. And moving on to the next one is chassis number 7127, nicknamed Naraya, and this thing is one of the best specs as well. Exposed blue carbon with beautiful gold accents, a beautiful shade in its own. Even the rim of the wheel is also painted in gold, and even on the calipers, even the center locks are also painted in gold, and even the Koenigsegg emblem on the brake calipers also in gold, the Naraya and RS as well in gold. A beautiful spec in its own. I mean, exposed carbon is good, but colored exposed carbon, now that's where you have me. A beautiful spec in its own. And next on is one of the 2 XS's, chassis number 7128, of course. Only 2 Agera XS's were made, this being the first one, finished in a shade called Carosserie Orange, a very beautiful bright shade of orange in fact. And this also has the double canards, as you guys can see, with a way more prominent splitter, that center strike, of course, the side skirts, the rear wing, and of course this is also, as I said, one of only 2 XS's ever made. A beautiful shade as well. And this thing in fact came out with the hollow air core carbon fiber wheels from factory, but it looks like the owner replaced them with the VGR, so this thing still does look good. I agree, air core hollow carbon fiber wheels are good, they are light, but the VGRs, especially with these turbine look of the wheel, they give a look that not even any carbon fiber wheel on this planet can give. Anyways guys, that was chassis number 7128XS, and moving on to chassis number 7131, i.e. the Agera RS Gryphon, i.e. the very one that crashed and that caused the replacement car, i.e. the Agera RS Phoenix, which we'll be taking a look at in a bit. Both of them are the same spec, exposed carbon fiber with gold accents. Wow, but nevertheless this thing was still rebuilt and sold, and this is in fact the same, literally the same spec as the Phoenix, as you will see in a bit. But nevertheless, exposed carbon fiber with a very bold color always goes very well, and it looks like an ongoing theme of carbon with gold is seen and quite prominent among most RSs, and this thing still looks good. I mean, carbon fiber hollow wheels as well, the double canards in fact, a proper way more prominent splitter, side skirts as well, and a wing. This in fact doesn't have an RS badge on the back. Wow, that's interesting, on the end plates of course, but nevertheless, carbon with a bright color, you can never go wrong. And next one is chassis number 7132. This is not the best pick out there, but this is also a complete exposed blue carbon car. Nevertheless, it's still exposed carbon in its own, there's no accents or anything, but nevertheless exposed blue carbon, you can never go wrong, obviously with the carbon fiber splitter, the canards, the side skirts and the wing. And moving on to chassis number 7133, this is also, guys, as I said, a dull color with the bright color as the accent color is always a beautiful combo, and in terms of Koenigsegg specs, it works really well. I mean, just look at it, it is a metallic grey or a dark grey, and the orange just accentuates the car way more, especially the carbon fiber parts, the end plates of the front splitter, the canards, even the framing of the center carbon fiber stripe, the side door stripe. I wish even the final big bit of the side skirt was even painted in orange, but nevertheless, to each their own. But nevertheless guys, a dull color with the bright color as the accent color, you can never go wrong with it. And well, as I said, literally the same thing carried over to chassis number 7135, nicknamed Valhalla, which literally also shows the same thing. This is a pastel light grey, but nevertheless it's a dull color, but with the orange accent color, it shows and ups the look so much. I mean, just look at it. I mean, this, even the side door stripe, it even has the frame of the vent painted in it, which beautifully enhances the car's look. And I mean, even the RS is painted in orange, even the brake calipers are painted. It is a beautiful spec in its own, a beautiful one. And moving on to chassis number 7136, nicknamed RS1, and this in fact takes P2 in my Agera RS spec list, solely because of the fact of its blue interior matching with the accent color of blue. I mean, the interior pops way more than the exterior or even the accent color blue, and I for one love that. I mean, this is in fact one of the 3 1 megawatt upgraded or 1 megawatt optioned RSS, guys. This thing puts out 1360 horsepower, a beautiful spec in its own. I mean, white is good, but with the fact that the entire front lip of this front splitter, even the side skirt and the central vertical strake has also been completely pinstriped in blue, and the canards, this enhances the look so much, and not to mention that beautiful blue interior that literally sticks out like a sore thumb. And this very Agera RS or the RS1 is in fact one of the most famous Agera RSs out there, solely because Doug DeMuro himself reviewed this very car a couple of years ago, and it was worth 10 million back then. So just imagine how much this thing can be worth right now. I'd say over 12 million easy. I'm pretty sure it's way more than that, but I'm trying to be conservative. But nevertheless, guys, moving on to chassis number 7137, named Draken. This thing is also a complete exposed carbon fiber body with white accents. It is still a good spec. If it is still decent, if you ask me, I wish I had used a different color. But nevertheless, to each their own. It is still a Agera RS. It is still 1160 brake horsepower car, thereby a proper beast in its own. A complete base splitter, the canards, the side skirts, the wing of course. This has in fact got the rear wing mounted on the rear slope, so that is in fact quite rare. The wing mirrors as well, a complete carbon fiber car. Nevertheless, an Agera RS and exposed carbon fiber, you can never go wrong. And moving on to chassis number 742, making this the second XS, and this is nicknamed the King, and this is in fact called Candy Red Apple, and this literally looks sort of like Rossordino, but the metallic version of that. But nevertheless, it still looks good. It is in fact one of the 2 XSs, as I said, a complete candy red exterior with the central carbon fiber stripe, but with silver pinstriping, as you guys can see. I mean, on the canards, you can literally see it framing the central carbon fiber stripe. So this thing looks really good like that. Wow, even carbon fiber louvers, a complete carbon fiber roof, in fact, well, that's rare. A carbon fiber wing, carbon fiber splitter, of course. This thing is enhanced one with the double canards and the side skirt as well, a beautiful spec in its own. And moving on to chassis number 7143, which we already discussed, Ruthie, of course, the record setting car, the most iconic Agera RS out there, of course, a beautiful shade of dark red with silver accents, a beautiful shade in its own. I've got nothing else to say about it because this is in fact the record setter. That in its own speaks a lot about it. And moving on to chassis number 7144, nicknamed the Phoenix, i.e. the replacement car for the Agera RS Gryphon. And this thing is also, as I said, the exact same spec as that exposed carbon fiber with gold accents, but nevertheless it is still a beautiful spec in its own. I mean, it has even got some custom stitching on the headrest, as you guys can see, a beautiful one. I mean, exposed carbon fiber with a really out there color, you can never go wrong. And this and the Gryphon are proper hints and proper testaments to that. And moving on to chassis number 7147, and this is in fact one of the boldest specs you will ever see on a Koenigsegg, and I for one dig it, and that is the fact because this is in fact a beigeish white color with red carbon all over. Everything that is supposed to be base carbon is red carbon, and this thing sticks out way more than any other Koenigsegg you will ever see. I mean, just look at that rear end. The entire deck lid along with the wing is completely embedded and literally crafted in red carbon, and I for one think that red carbon isn't the best thing in the world, but after looking at this specific chassis number 7147 RS, my mind has completely changed, and I wish, wow, I literally have no words to say about this. This is a proper bold spec. I mean, this is the definition of a bold spec in its own. I mean, complete red carbon all over the place. That's something I wouldn't have imagined, but I'm not saying no to it in any way. It looks oh so good, and it has also got the hollow air core carbon fiber wheels with what looks like to be white brake calipers with the Koenigsegg written in red to match the red carbon, of course. A beautiful little detail. I mean, just look at it, guys. I mean, the red carbon shouldn't enhance it so much, but it just does. That is just Koenigsegg's design working its magic, along with the fact that it works harmoniously with any color or any colored carbon that is put on it. I mean, that is literally just Koenigsegg's design. And moving on to chassis number 7149, this is literally the same spec as the Naraya, exposed blue carbon fiber with gold accents, but this has got a tan interior. But nevertheless, it still doesn't differ as much from it. I mean, it does look good, but nevertheless, guys, literally the same Naraya spec repeated with a tan interior, but nevertheless, it still looks good. As I said, a dull color, but this is exposed carbon fiber, so this is blue exposed carbon fiber to be at that. So this thing looks oh so good, and I wish there was a little bit more blue on it, but nevertheless a proper beautiful spec. And moving on to chassis number 7176, this is finished in a very unique shade called Taipei Gold, and this thing actually looks like pink gold. It looks like pink and gold had a baby, and the outcome was this, and it's called Taipei Gold. And this, it shouldn't look as good as it does, but being Koenigsegg in their own fashion, they pull off most colors, and the pinstriping in its own is literally just the same paint color, and it looks really good in its own. I mean, I wish even the canards were painted in it, but nevertheless, it's a beautiful spec. Quite a rare color you'll never see on a Koenigsegg, but nevertheless, it has still been done on one of the 27 Agera RSs. And moving on to chassis number 7178, nicknamed Zhen, this is in fact one of the two Koenigseggs, the other one being the Regera, which was seized in China by Chinese authorities because the owner smuggled both of them, the Regera and this exact Agera RS, into China illegally. So they were smuggled and auctioned off. And this is in fact the third 1 megawatt opted RS, guys. This can put out 1360 horsepower, and this literally has the same spec as the Genesis, but this has red badging. As you guys can see, the literal crest of the Koenigsegg logo is in red color. That's something unique that you've never seen before. This has got single canards compared to double canards of the Genesis, but nevertheless, exposed carbon fiber with light red, you can never go wrong, as I said. And this in fact has a complete gloss carbon fiber body with a matte carbon fiber front splitter, as you guys can see. That's something rare, but nevertheless, exposed carbon fiber with red, you can never go wrong. And of course, hollow carbon fiber wheels to point out. And moving on to chassis number 7179, this looks like it's finished in a shade similar to Monterey Blue, but it still looks really good, and it even has an all blue interior, which is a little bit of a lighter shade than the exterior shade of blue, but nevertheless it matches the color, hence it still looks good with yellow pinstriping here and there. But I wish the yellow pinstriping was a little bit more prominent, specifically on the front splitter, the vertical central strake, as well as the front lip, but nevertheless, to each their own. It was the owner's choice. It still looks really good, and even the badging of the RS, i.e. the Agera RS, is also in yellow. So this thing matches quite a bit in terms of the accent color. And moving on to chassis number 7181, this is literally a replica of the RS1 spec, but the accent color has been changed from blue to red, and it has no business looking this good, and it still pulls off the look solely because of the complete all red interior. I mean, that sticks out like a sore thumb on its own, and I still wish the complete red pinstriping was a little bit more prominent, specifically once again on the side skirts, the front lip, and of course the entire front lip of this front splitter as well as the central vertical strike. But nevertheless, it still looks really good. I mean, the entire interior on its own is completely embedded in red leather, so that on its own sticks out quite a bit, and it even has a unique rear wing as well. And moving on to the final Agera RS, guys, i.e. chassis number 7195, nicknamed RST, which are actually the initials of the owner, is finished in a shade of Josh Blue, and this thing is also quite a good spec, literally the same wing as the chassis number 7181 RS, but nevertheless in a complete shade called Josh Blue, with as well the painting of white pinstriping as well all over. I don't know if that pops out as much, but nevertheless it still does look good so far. But nevertheless, guys, that makes 27 Agera RSs, guys. I mean, that is a lot of what they've produced, and some of their best specs as well. The chassis number 7122 RSR, as I said, takes the cake. Second place going to the RS1, of course. Wow, what do you guys think? I mean, let me know in the comments which one would you take. I mean, you've got 27 to pick from, quite a plethora if you ask me. So let me know in the comments which one would you pick. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Remember to hit that sub button and click the bell to ensure that you don't miss out on any future videos. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. See ya.